Chapter 3. Pa's house was only 5 blocks away, but Spoon decided to walk the long way, meandering through Hillington Green and lagging along the railroad tracks before winding back on course. He needed time to think. When Joni asked him why they weren't going straight to Pa's, Spoon simply said it was part of the project. The explanation was good enough for Joni. She seized the opportunity to collect more sticks and put them in her suitcase. The light seemed odd to Spoon. Everything was blanched by the sun. The leaves on the trees looked dull and tinged with gray like old coins. Even Joni's features seemed bleached out. My sister's an alien, Spoon thought. After turning the corner onto Willow Street, Joni held the bag of vegetables and watched Spoon jump over a fire hydrant straddle-legged. Then they walked slowly past the Frost's house. The house was painted a rich, glossy yellow color, but in this particular light, it looked dingy. Don and Douglas Frost were Spoon's best friends. They were identical twins, although it wasn't difficult to tell them apart, even if you didn't know them well. Douglas was thinner and shorter than Don, and shy. Don had a penchant for terrible puns, was forever doing armpit farts, and never wore short pants, even in sweltering heat, unless he was playing basketball or swimming. Bet you miss your friends, Joni said. Spoon glanced at the house and nodded. The Frost's house was quiet. The lawn was shaggy. Don and Douglas had been away at a week-long basketball camp, and now they were up north at their family's cabin for 2 weeks. Another 2 of Spoon's classmates, Alex Norman and Nate Dempster, had gone to the basketball camp as well. When they all had signed up for camp the previous winter, Spoon had wanted to go badly. But because of the planned cross-country trip to Evie's, he had had to decline. By the time Graham died and the trip to Evie's was canceled, the basketball camp was filled. With prompting from Don and Douglas, Spoon reluctantly agreed to having his name put on the waiting list, but he only made it to number 4. He wondered if it had all worked out for the best. What if he had gotten to attend camp and then missed Graham so much, suddenly found himself so sad because of her that he needed to go home? The thought embarrassed him. Don and Douglas had asked if Spoon could join them at the cabin following camp, but Spoon had gone last year, and Mrs. Frost said that she couldn't handle more than 1 guest at a time, and it was Angela's turn to pick a friend to vacation with them. Angela was Don and Douglas's 8-year-old sister. Don, Douglas, and Spoon called her Devila. Spoon was relieved that he hadn't had to decline an official invitation from Mr. and Mrs. Frost, relieved for once that Devila was treated fairly. "Goodbye, Frost's house," Joni said, waving. She blew a kiss. As much as he wanted to lose Joni, Spoon knew that he couldn't, not out here anyway. He'd try to ditch her at Pa's. At least then she'd be safe. His parents and teachers were forever sounding warnings about strangers. You can't be too careful. Don't think it can't happen to you. Trust your instincts. A few times he ran ahead and hid behind a tree or a garage, then suddenly sprang out at her, growling, just to give her a little scare. It worked. Joni screamed and dropped her suitcase every time. But then she was right at his heels again, like his shadow. No grudges held. As they crossed Commonwealth Avenue, the busiest street in the neighborhood, Spoon took Joni's hand in his. Joni squeezed Spoon's palm. "Why did we call Graham, Graham, but we call Evie, Evie?" Spoon flicked Joni's hand away as soon as they were safely on the sidewalk. He shrugged. "I don't know," he said. He'd never really given it much thought before. Graham's name was Martha, but she had always been Graham. And Evie was their grandmother too, but they had always called her Evie. Never Grandma or Grammy or Graham. "I don't know," he said again. Names were funny things. His certainly was. His name was Frederick, but everyone called him Spoon. He hated it when he had to tell someone the story of his name. Spoon? People would say upon hearing his name for the first time. They always had the same pinched look on their faces. Many people had tried to guess the origin of his name, but none had ever guessed correctly. He doubted if anyone ever would. One morning, when Spoon's mother was pregnant with him, she decided to plant some peonies in the side yard. The peonies had been divided from a plant of grams and were at least half a century old. Kay had only been digging for minutes when her shovel hit something that clinked. She bent down, reached into the shallow hole, and found a tarnished baby spoon peeking out of the dirt. A young, lanky boy with thick curls, wearing a sailor suit and holding a hobby horse, was embossed on the handle of the spoon. And the name Frederick was engraved into the back of the handle in an elegant script. As Kay cleaned the spoon with the hem of her gardening smock, she felt the baby kick for the first time. She made up her mind then and there that if their baby was a boy, he would be named Frederick. Following Frederick's birth, friends and neighbors asked where the name had come from. Was he named for an uncle? A great-grandfather? After telling the story time and again, Scott and Kay started calling Frederick Spoon Baby, and then simply Spoon. Charlie took to it quickly. Spoon, or Poon, as he pronounced it, rolled off his 2-year-old tongue with much greater ease than did Frederick. He loved the ooh sound. Soon, Spoon was the only name anyone called the baby, and now when Spoon heard the name Frederick, it barely registered with him, barely caused his head to turn. Sometimes when he was asked, he lied and said that Spoon was a nickname for Spooner, his given name, an old family name on his mother's side. The spoon lay on Kay's dresser amid a dusty jumble: hairpins, rubber bands, foreign coins, beads, stone fruit. "I'll give it to you," she told him once, "when you're old enough for it to mean something to you." "There he is!" Joni said all of a sudden. "There's Pa!" Down the block, beyond a parked car and through some bushes, Spoon could see his grandfather. He was carrying a garbage can to the curb. Joni ran ahead. When Spoon reached the front walk, Joni was already in Pa's arms. "We're here to work on a project," she announced. Spoon blushed. He unrolled and rolled the top of the bag of vegetables. The lettuce leaves were getting squashed and wilted. Pa put Joni down. "That's funny," he said. "As it turns out, I do have a project, and I could use all the help I can get. I'm cleaning out the garage." "So that's the project?" Joni said gleefully, winking at Spoon. Spoon sighed with relief. What a coincidence. He could barely believe his good fortune. Now Joni would be completely occupied, and he could do what he needed to do. Maybe he'd even find something of Graham's in the garage. He and Pa greeted each other with a hug. Spoon handed over the bag of vegetables, and then they walked up the driveway to the garage, side by side.